The emergency transmission crackled through the void of space, carrying with it the desperate pleas of a dying civilization. Ambassador HFY of the Kelrani Federation clutched the communication device with her four-fingered hands, her normally pristine blue scales now dulled with exhaustion and fear. Around her, the once magnificent capital city of Veltereth lay in ruins, not from war, but from something far more insidious. The plague had started small, as these things always did. A few isolated cases on the mining colonies at the edge of Kelrani space. The symptoms seemed manageable at first. Mild fever, slight discoloration of the scales, nothing that their advanced medical technology couldn't handle. But this pathogen was unlike anything they had encountered before. It adapted, evolved, and spread with a terrifying intelligence that defied all their scientific understanding. Within 6 months, it had consumed entire star systems. The Kelrani weren't the only ones suffering. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The proud warrior race of Ithaxians, with their impenetrable exoskeletons, found themselves helpless as the disease liquefied their internal organs. The energy beings of the Luminari Collective, who had thought themselves immune to biological threats, discovered that the plague could somehow infect their very essence, dimming their light until they faded into nothing. HFY had watched her own family succumb one by one. First, her eldest son, a brilliant scientist who had been working desperately on a cure. Then, her mate, whose strength had carried their family through countless hardships. Finally, her youngest daughter, barely past her first molting, had slipped away in the night while HFY held her close. The galaxy's greatest medical minds had been stumped. The Andromedan Syndicate, with their vast databases of biological knowledge spanning millions of species, had declared the pathogen impossible. The machine intelligence of a Nexus core had run trillions of simulations, all ending in the same result: total extinction within 18 months. It was then that someone mentioned the humans. The humans were relatively new to galactic society, having only made first contact some 50 years prior. They were considered a curiosity more than anything else. A young species with limited technology, primitive medicine, and a tendency toward violence that made most civilized races uncomfortable. Their ships were crude, their weapons unsophisticated, and their diplomatic efforts often ended in confusion due to their bizarre cultural practices. But there were rumors. Whispers from the Outer Rim territories where human merchant vessels had been spotted. Stories of miraculous recoveries in human settlements, of diseases that had plagued other species for generations simply vanishing after human intervention. Most dismissed these as exaggerations or misunderstandings, but desperate times called for desperate measures. HFY stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session, her voice hoarse from grief but steady with determination. The great chamber, normally filled with representatives from thousands of species, was noticeably sparse. Too many chairs sat empty, their occupants claimed by the plague or busy fighting for survival in their home systems. Honored delegates, she began, her translator device struggling to convey the emotional weight of her words across so many different languages and communication methods. We have exhausted every option. Our greatest minds, our most advanced technologies, our deepest scientific knowledge. None of it has been enough. The plague continues to spread, and at current projections, we have perhaps months before total galactic extinction. A ripple of distress passed through the assembly. The Vorthack delegates' tentacles writhed in agitation, while the crystalline representative of the Shard Confederacy pulsed with anxious light. I propose, HFY continued, that we set aside our pride and reach out to the humans. Yes, they're primitive by our standards. Yes, their methods are unorthodox, but they're also survivors. In their short history, they have faced countless plagues and diseases on their own world and overcome them all. Perhaps their perspective, their unconventional approach, might provide the breakthrough we need. The debate that followed was heated. Many delegates argued that approaching such a primitive species would be beneath them. Others worried that humans might demand territories or technologies in exchange for their aid. The hierarchs of the Celestial Empire were particularly vocal in their opposition, stating that their race had been dealing with disease for millions of years before humans even existed. But as the hours passed and more reports of spreading infection came in, even the most stubborn opponents began to waver. When a Nexus Core announced that 3 more systems had gone dark, their entire populations presumed dead, the vote was finally called. The measure passed by a narrow margin. HFY found herself appointed as the primary liaison, tasked with making contact with Earth and requesting their assistance. She had studied human languages and customs as much as possible in the short time available, but their communication methods remained confusing. The concept of sarcasm alone had taken her days to understand, and she still wasn't sure she had it right. The message was carefully crafted, translated through multiple linguistic algorithms, and checked by every available xenolinguist. It was a formal request for medical assistance, offering technology transfers, territorial concessions, and cultural exchanges in return for help with their plague crisis. What they didn't know was that the Human Translation Matrix had a critical error in its alien language database. Where the message requested medical support vessels, the translation came through as rapid response military deployment. Where it described healthcare intervention, the human computers interpreted strategic battlefield assistance. And where the desperate alien coalition begged for doctors and medical supplies, Earth's military command understood a request for their newest and most powerful battle fleet. Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of the UES Prometheus, humanity's flagship and the pride of their fleet. The massive dreadnought hung in space like a sleeping giant, its hull bristling with weapons systems and defensive arrays. Around it, a formation of 50 of humanity's most advanced warships maintained perfect formation, their crews running final checks on systems that had never been tested in real combat. "Admiral," called out Commander Torres from the communications station. "We're receiving final confirmation from Fleet Command. All ships report ready for immediate departure." Chen nodded, her weathered face betraying none of the concern she felt. At 63, she had seen humanity through its first tentative steps into galactic politics. She had been there when they made first contact, had witnessed the mixture of fascination and barely concealed condescension from the alien races. Humans are tolerated, but never truly accepted as equals. Now, for the first time, they were being asked for help. A galactic emergency of unprecedented scale, and somehow the advanced civilizations of the galaxy had turned to primitive Earth for assistance. Chen couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction at the irony. "What's our current understanding of the situation, Commander?" she asked. Torres consulted his datapad, scrolling through the translated communications they had received. It appears to be a multi-system conflict with some kind of biological warfare component. The aliens are requesting immediate military intervention to help stop what they're calling a spreading contamination. Their own forces have been overwhelmed. Biological weapons, Chun mused. Nasty business. But if it's gotten this bad, they must be dealing with something truly dangerous. Are our containment protocols ready? Yes, Admiral. All ships have been equipped with the latest biodefense systems. Medical bays are stocked with broad-spectrum treatments, and our research teams are standing by to analyze any biological agents we encounter. Chun walked to the main display, where a holographic map showed their intended route through several star systems toward the heart of the crisis. Red zones marked areas where alien communications had gone silent, presumably lost to whatever biological agent was being used as a weapon. Timeline, Commander. At maximum burn, we can reach the Kelrani system in 12 days. That puts us at the epicenter of the reported contamination zone. Good. Send word to all ship commanders. We're dealing with an unknown biological threat that has apparently overwhelmed multiple advanced civilizations. Standard quarantine procedures are in effect from the moment we enter alien space. No shore leave, no non-essential personnel transfers, and all environmental suits are to be tested twice daily. Understood, Admiral. As Chun prepared to give the order to depart, she reflected on how far humanity had come. 50 years ago, they had been alone in the universe, believing themselves to be the only intelligent life among the stars. Now they were heading into the depths of space to aid alien civilizations in what appeared to be their darkest hour. She had read the reports about humanity's reputation among the galactic community. They were seen as aggressive, unpredictable, and technologically inferior. Their medicine was considered primitive, their weapons crude, their tactics barbaric. But Chen knew something that the aliens apparently didn't. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their weapons. It was their refusal to give up. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication system. This is Admiral Chen. Today we embark on humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs. The situation we're heading into is dire, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Multiple civilizations are counting on us to help them stop a biological threat that their own advanced science couldn't handle. She paused, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so distant and now felt like home. I won't lie to you. We don't know what we're flying into. The reports are confused, the situation is chaotic, and we're operating with incomplete information. But that's nothing new for us. Humanity has always found a way to survive, to adapt, to overcome obstacles that others thought impossible. Today, we're going to show the galaxy what that means. The response was immediate. Across 50 ships, thousands of human voices answered in unison. "Aye, Admiral." "Fleet Command, this is the UES Prometheus. All ships report ready for departure. Requesting permission to begin humanitarian mission to the Kelrani system." "Permission granted, Admiral." "Good hunting." Chun smiled at the traditional send-off, even though this was supposed to be an aid mission rather than a military operation. Perhaps old habits died hard, or perhaps Fleet Command understood something about the nature of this mission that the aliens who had requested it did not. "All ships, prepare for jump. Destination, Kelrani system." Let's go remind the galaxy why you never count out the human race. The space around the fleet shimmered as 50 of humanity's most advanced warships engaged their faster-than-light drives simultaneously. In a flash of blue-white light, they vanished from Earth's solar system, carrying with them humanity's hopes, determination, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Behind them, the emergency communication channels continued to buzz with increasingly desperate messages from across the galaxy. The plague was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. Entire species were falling silent. The great civilizations that had once looked down on humanity with amused tolerance were now facing the very real possibility of extinction. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a human battle fleet raced toward a rendezvous that would change everything, though perhaps not in the way anyone expected. What none of them knew yet was that this wouldn't be a story about humanity's military might or their advanced weapons. It would be a story about a different kind of strength entirely. The kind of strength that had allowed a young species to survive ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have wiped them out dozens of times over. The kind of strength that refused to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. The kind of strength that was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about the difference between giving up and giving everything you had. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelrani system, and Admiral Chen immediately understood why the aliens had called for help. What should have been a bustling hub of interstellar commerce was instead a graveyard of dead ships and silent planets. "My God," whispered Commander Torres from his position at the sensor array. "Admiral, I'm reading hundreds of ships just drifting out there. No power signatures, no life signs, nothing." Chun moved to stand behind him, studying the displays that painted a picture of devastation unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Massive vessels that dwarfed even their flagship hung motionless in space, their hulls dark and cold. Some showed signs of having been abandoned in haste. Escape pods launched, cargo containers jettisoned, desperate attempts to flee whatever had overtaken them. "Are we picking up any distress signals?" Chen asked. "Negative, Admiral. But there's something." Torres adjusted his controls, filtering through the electromagnetic spectrum. There's a weak transmission coming from the fourth planet. It's on one of the emergency frequencies the aliens gave us. Let's hear it. The bridge speakers crackled to life, filled with static and the unmistakable sound of desperation. The voice that emerged was speaking in the translated Kelrani language, but the emotion transcended any linguistic barriers. Anyone who can hear this transmission, please respond. This is Ambassador HFY of the Kelrani Federation, broadcasting from Emergency Shelter 77 Alpha on Veltereth Prime. The plague has reached our homeworld. Our population has fallen from 12 billion to fewer than 50 million in the past week alone. We estimate we have perhaps days before complete societal collapse. Chun felt a chill run down her spine. 50 million survivors out of 12 billion. The scale of the disaster was almost incomprehensible. The transmission continued. We have sent out requests for medical assistance to Earth, and are praying that your healers can succeed where ours have failed. If you're receiving this message, please know that we are grateful beyond words for your willingness to help. We await your medical ships at the following coordinates. Medical ships. Chun turned to Torres. Commander, pull up our original mission briefing again. I want to review exactly what Earth Command told us we were responding to. Torres quickly accessed the files, his expression growing confused as he read. Admiral, according to our briefing, we were responding to a request for military intervention against biological weapons being used in a multi-system war. The aliens specifically requested our most advanced battle fleet, and, according to that transmission, they're expecting medical ships and healers. Chun felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Commander, I think we may have a serious communication error here. She called for an immediate conference with her senior staff. Within minutes, the Prometheus's war room was filled with department heads trying to piece together what had gone wrong. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the fleet's chief medical officer, was the first to speak up. Admiral, I've been reviewing the xenobiological data we received from the aliens, and this doesn't look like a biological weapon at all. The pathogen they're describing shows characteristics consistent with a naturally occurring plague, possibly something that jumped species barriers or mutated beyond their ability to treat. So we're not looking at a war, Chun said slowly. We're looking at a medical emergency. A medical emergency that has apparently wiped out most of the galactic civilization, added Chief Science Officer Commander Park. And they called us for help because they've heard rumors about human medicine. Chun almost laughed at the irony. Here was humanity's most powerful battle fleet, armed with enough firepower to sterilize planets, rushing to the aid of aliens who needed doctors and medical supplies. It would have been comical if not for the billions of lives hanging in the balance. Options, people. We can't exactly perform surgery with photon torpedoes. Dr. Warren stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Actually, Admiral, we might be better equipped for this than you think. When Fleet Command equipped us for what they thought was biological warfare, they gave us extensive medical facilities, research laboratories, and treatment capabilities. Each ship in the fleet has a fully equipped hospital, and we're carrying broad-spectrum medicine's surgical equipment and research tools. We also have the most advanced biocontainment systems in human space, added Chief Engineer Rodriguez. If this plague is as contagious as the report suggests, that might be crucial. Chun nodded slowly. What about personnel? Do we have medical staff? Every ship has a full medical complement, Dr. Warren replied. Plus, we brought along some of Earth's best researchers and specialists when we thought we might be dealing with biological weapons. Dr. Kim Patel from the Geneva Institute is aboard the science vessel Darwin, and Dr. Marcus Webb from Johns Hopkins is on the medical ship Hippocrates. The Hippocrates, Chun mused. Ironic name for what was supposed to be a warship escort. Commander Torres looked up from his console. Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the planet. They're asking for an immediate response. Put it through. Ambassador HFY's voice filled the room again, and this time Chun could hear the exhaustion and hope warring in her tone. Human vessels, if you can hear this, please respond. We have been monitoring your fleet's arrival, and we are confused. Our sensors show 50 military vessels, including what appears to be a massive dreadnought. We were expecting medical ships. Have you perhaps brought your healers aboard warships for protection during the journey? Chun exchanged glances with her staff, then activated the communication system. Ambassador HFY, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Space Fleet. We received your request for assistance and responded immediately. I need to clarify something about our mission parameters. Can you confirm what type of aid you requested from Earth? There was a long pause before the response came. Admiral Chun, we requested medical assistance. Doctors, healers, treatment facilities, anything that could help us fight this plague that is destroying our civilization. We have heard stories of human medical capabilities and hope that your species might succeed where ours have failed. I see. Ambassador, there appears to have been a translation error in your original message. Earth interpreted your request as a call for military assistance against biological warfare. That's why you're seeing a battle fleet instead of a hospital ship. The silence that followed stretched for nearly a full minute. When Ambassador HFY finally responded, her voice carried a note of despair that made Chen's chest tighten. Then you cannot help us? Your warriors have come to fight a war, but our enemy cannot be defeated with weapons. Ambassador, Chun said firmly, I didn't say we couldn't help you. I said there was a translation error. My fleet may look like we're here to fight, but every one of my ships carries extensive medical facilities and some of the best doctors and researchers humanity has to offer. We're not just warriors, Ambassador. We're problem solvers. I don't understand. Chun smiled, even though the alien couldn't see her. Ambassador, when humanity prepares for biological warfare, we don't just bring weapons. We bring everything we need to understand, treat, and eliminate biological threats. That means doctors, scientists, research equipment, medical facilities, and treatment protocols. We came here ready for war, but we're equally ready to heal. She could hear something that might have been sobbing on the other end of the transmission. Admiral Chun, HFY finally managed. You have given us the first hope we have felt in months. Please, can you help us? That's why we're here, Ambassador. But I need you to understand something. My people are going to approach this problem differently than your scientists have. We're not as advanced as your civilization, and our methods might seem primitive or even barbaric to you. Are you willing to trust us to try? Admiral, our most advanced medical science has failed completely. At this point, we would welcome even primitive methods if they offered any chance of success. She nodded to Dr. Warren, who immediately began coordinating with the other ship's medical departments. Ambassador, we're going to start by sending down research teams in full environmental suits. We need samples of the pathogen, detailed information about its effects, and data on everything your scientists have already tried. Can you provide secure facilities for our people to work? Yes, of course. We have emergency research bunkers that are still sterile. I'll send you the coordinates immediately. Good. In the meantime, I want you to gather every piece of information you have about this plague. When it first appeared, where it started, how it spreads, what treatments you've attempted, everything. No detail is too small. Understood, Admiral. As the communication ended, Chun turned to address her staff. All right, people. This isn't the mission we trained for, but it's the mission we've got. Dr. Warren, I want you to coordinate with all fleet medical departments, set up research protocols, and begin analyzing any data the aliens can provide. Yes, Admiral. Commander Park, work with the science teams to understand this pathogen from a biological warfare perspective. Even if it's natural, the principles are the same. How does it work? How does it spread? What are its weaknesses? Right away, Commander Torres, establish secure communication channels with the alien government. We're going to need to coordinate closely with their people. Aye, Admiral. Chen looked around the room at her staff, seeing the same determination in their faces that had driven humanity to overcome countless obstacles throughout their history. Ladies and gentlemen, the galaxy's most advanced civilizations have failed to solve this problem. They've thrown their best science, their most sophisticated technology, and their greatest minds at this plague, and they've failed. Now, they're turning to us, a primitive species with crude medicine and barbaric methods. She paused, letting that sink in. They have no idea what they've done. They think they're asking for help from their intellectual inferiors. What they've actually done is call in a species that survived the Black Death, smallpox, polio, AIDS, and a dozen other plagues that should have wiped us out. They've called in a species that doesn't know how to give up. Dr. Warren spoke up. Admiral, what if we can't solve it either? What if this pathogen really is beyond our abilities? Chun smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression. Doctor, in the past week alone, this plague has killed over 11 billion intelligent beings. Every hour we delay, thousands more die. The galaxy's greatest minds have declared this problem unsolvable. She stood up, her voice growing stronger. But you know what? Humanity has never met a problem we declared unsolvable. We might not succeed, but we're going to try every approach, every treatment, every crazy idea that occurs to us. We're going to throw everything we have at this problem, and if that doesn't work, we're going to invent new approaches on the spot. The aliens think they called for help from their inferiors. What they actually did was call in the cavalry. As her staff dispersed to begin their tasks, Chin remained in the war room, studying the tactical displays that now showed not enemy positions, but population centers in desperate need of aid. She thought about the irony of the situation, a battle fleet arriving to fight a different kind of war entirely. But perhaps that was what made humanity special. They didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to adapt, how to survive, how to find solutions where others saw only problems. The next few hours would determine whether human stubbornness and ingenuity could succeed where galactic sophistication had failed. But as Admiral Chun looked out at her fleet, 50 ships full of humans who refused to accept defeat, she felt something the galaxy hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Dr. Kim Patel had seen a lot of diseases in her 30-year career, but nothing had prepared her for this. As she stood in the sterile research facility beneath Veltereth Prime's surface, surrounded by alien technology she barely understood, she stared at the pathogen samples through her microscope and felt a chill of recognition. "This is impossible," she murmured, adjusting the magnification for the 10th time. Ambassador HFY stood nearby, her blue scales dulled with exhaustion and fear. Around them, a mixed team of human researchers and Kelrani scientists worked frantically to understand an enemy that had already claimed most of their civilization. "What do you see, Dr. Patel?" HFY asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Patel looked up from the microscope, her expression troubled. "Ambassador, this pathogen, it's not just one organism. It's dozens, maybe hundreds, all working together in perfect coordination." "I don't understand." Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been analyzing data at a nearby terminal, looked up with alarm. "Kim, are you saying this is some kind of symbiotic collective?" "Worse than that," Patel replied. "Look at these interaction patterns. The organisms aren't just cooperating, they're communicating. They're sharing information, adapting their strategies based on the host's immune response, even coordinating their reproduction cycles for maximum spread." HFY's scales shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of distress that the humans had learned to recognize. But that's impossible. No natural pathogen could be so sophisticated. "Natural, yes," Patel said grimly, "but not from your world, or any world in this galaxy, I suspect." The room fell silent except for the hum of alien machinery and the quiet breathing of the research team. Finally, Dr. Webb spoke up. "You're thinking extragalactic origin. Has to be. This level of biological sophistication, this perfect coordination, it's like nothing we've encountered before. But there's something else." Patel turned back to her microscope, making careful adjustments. "These organisms show signs of directed evolution. Someone or something has been guiding their development." Ambassador HFY made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, but the humans understood it as despair. "Then we are doomed. If this plague was created by some advanced intelligence, how can we possibly fight it? Dr. Patel looked up at the alien ambassador, and for the first time since arriving, she smiled. Ambassador, you're thinking about this all wrong. Yes, this pathogen is sophisticated. Yes, it's been engineered or guided by some intelligence. But you know what? It's still just a biological system, and biological systems can be hacked. Hacked. HFY's translator struggled with the human term. Disrupted, subverted, turned against itself, Webb explained. Kim, what are you thinking? Patel was already moving to another workstation, her fingers flying over the controls as she called updated displays. Look at these communication pathways between the organisms. They're using chemical signals, electromagnetic pulses, even quantum entanglement for long-range coordination. It's incredibly sophisticated, but it's also incredibly complex. And complex systems have vulnerabilities. She highlighted several sections of data on the main display. Your scientists have been trying to kill this thing with conventional treatments, antibiotics, antivirals, immune system boosters. But you're fighting a war with outdated tactics. This isn't a simple infection. It's an invasion force with command and control structures. So how do we fight it? Asked Dr. Reyes, one of the human xenobiologists. We don't fight it, Patel said, her excitement growing. We confuse it. Look at these communication frequencies. The organisms are constantly talking to each other, sharing data about host defenses, coordinating their attacks. What if we could inject false information into that network? Webb caught on immediately. Biological warfare, not against the pathogen itself, but against its communication system. Exactly. We create decoy signals that mimic the pathogen's own communications, but feed it false information about host defenses. Make it think the immune system is stronger than it is in some areas, weaker in others. Disrupt its coordination. Ambassador HFY listened to the exchange with growing hope and confusion. But how could you possibly understand their communication methods well enough to deceive them? Patel grinned, and there was something predatory in her expression that made the alien take a step back. Ambassador, humans have been waging biological warfare for thousands of years. Not against aliens, but against diseases just as sophisticated as this one. We've learned to turn pathogens against themselves, to exploit their own biological processes, to make them self-destruct. But your technology is primitive compared to ours, HFY protested. How could your method succeed where our advanced science has failed? Dr. Webb answered this time. Because sometimes the best solution is the simple one. Your scientists have been trying to understand this pathogen completely before attempting to fight it. That's a luxury we can't afford. We're going to start throwing everything we have at it and see what sticks. Over the next 6 hours, the human research team worked with an intensity that amazed their alien counterparts. They didn't follow the careful, methodical procedures that Kelrani science demanded. Instead, they ran dozens of experiments simultaneously, tested wild theories without extensive preparation, and combined approaches that traditional scientific protocol would never allow. Dr. Sarah Okafor, a biochemist from the medical ship Hippocrates, was the first to achieve a breakthrough. Dr. Patel, you need to see this, she called out from across the lab. Patel hurried over to find Okafor staring at a display showing pathogen samples under attack by what looked like competing microorganisms. What are those? Patel asked. Human gut bacteria, Okafor replied with a satisfied smile. Specifically lactobacillus and bifidobacterium strains that I've been modifying for the past 3 hours. I introduced them to the pathogen samples, and look what happened. The display showed the alien pathogen organisms in obvious distress. Their normally perfect coordination was breaking down, their communication signals becoming garbled and inconsistent. How was that possible? Ambassador HFY had appeared beside them, drawn by their excited voices. The bacteria are jamming their communications, Okafor explained. Human gut bacteria naturally produce compounds that interfere with bacterial communication pathways. I've enhanced those properties and tuned them specifically to disrupt the frequencies this pathogen uses. But that's... HFY paused, struggling with the concept. That's such a crude approach. How can simple bacteria defeat something so sophisticated? Dr. Webb laughed. Ambassador, sometimes the most sophisticated lock can be picked with a simple paperclip. Complexity isn't always strength. Sometimes it's a vulnerability. The breakthrough came 6 hours later when Dr. Chen Wei, a virologist from the research ship Darwin, made a connection that changed everything. People, I need everyone to look at this, she announced, her voice carrying across the lab. The team gathered around her workstation, where she had constructed a three-dimensional model of the pathogen's communication network. But this model showed something new, gaps in the network, places where the signals didn't reach. The pathogen's communication system has blind spots, Dr. Chen explained. Areas where the signals can't penetrate effectively. And look where those blind spots are located. She highlighted specific regions in the model, and Ambassador HFY gasped. The reproductive organs and the nervous system central nodes. Exactly. The pathogen can't effectively communicate with organisms that are attacking the host's most critical systems. It's a built-in safety feature, probably designed to prevent the pathogen from accidentally killing hosts before it can spread. Dr. Patel stared at the display, her mind racing. So, if we could deliver our jamming bacteria to those blind spot areas, we could establish communication dead zones, Dr. Webb finished. Areas where the pathogen organisms would be cut off from the collective intelligence, forced to operate independently. And, operating independently, they'd be vulnerable to conventional treatments, Dr. Okafor added. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity as the human team worked to develop what they called the Communication Disruption Protocol. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, and it definitely wasn't the kind of approach that galactic medical science would have considered proper. But it worked. The first test was conducted on a volunteer Kelrani who was in the final stages of the disease. Ambassador HFY had insisted on witnessing the procedure personally, despite the risks. Dr. Patel administered the modified bacteria through a series of targeted injections, while Dr. Chen monitored the pathogen's communication signals. For the first hour, nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually the signals began to degrade. Communication breakdown in sectors 7 through 12, Dr. Chen reported. The pathogen organisms are losing coordination. Immune system response is strengthening, added Dr. Reyes, monitoring the patient's vital signs. White blood cell count is rising rapidly. Within 6 hours, the patient's condition had stabilized. Within 12 hours, active pathogen counts were dropping across all major organ systems. Within 24 hours, the volunteer was sitting up and asking for food. Ambassador HFY stared at the medical readouts in disbelief. It worked. It actually worked. It worked for one patient, Dr. Patel cautioned. Now we need to scale it up for millions of people. That was where the human battle fleet finally proved its worth. Admiral Chun had anticipated this need and had her ship's manufacturing facilities working around the clock to produce the modified bacteria cultures. The fleet's medical bays were converted into treatment centers, and their transport shuttles became mobile treatment units. But the real genius of the human approach became clear when they began coordinating the treatment protocol across multiple worlds simultaneously. Admiral, Commander Torres reported from the Prometheus's command center, we've got treatment teams deploying to 47 different worlds. The logistics are incredibly complex, but we're managing to maintain supply chains across half the galaxy. Admiral Chen nodded, watching the tactical displays that now showed healing instead of warfare. That's what we're good at, Commander. Humans have always been excellent at logistics and coordination. We've been managing complex supply chains and coordinating massive operations for centuries. The results were extraordinary. Within a week, infection rates were dropping on every world where human treatment teams had arrived. Within 2 weeks, the plague spread had been completely halted. Within a month, active infections had been reduced by over 90% across the affected systems. But perhaps the most significant moment came when Ambassador HFY stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council, addressing delegates from dozens of species that had been saved from extinction. Honored delegates, she began, her voice strong for the first time in months. We asked the humans for medical assistance, and they sent us a battle fleet. We thought there had been a terrible mistake. We were wrong. She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had been marked by despair just weeks before. The humans didn't send us a battle fleet by mistake. They sent us a battle fleet because that's who they are. They don't just bring tools for one job. They bring tools for every job. They don't just prepare for the expected. They prepare for the impossible. When we asked for healers, they brought doctors who were ready to fight a war. When we asked for medicine, they brought laboratories that could function in combat zones. When we asked for hope, they brought a species that doesn't know how to surrender. Ambassador HFY's scales had returned to their normal vibrant blue, and her voice carried a strength that resonated through the translation systems. We have learned something important about humanity today. We have been measuring them by our standards, judging their technology, their medicine, their science against our own. But we were measuring the wrong things. Humanity's strength isn't in their technology. It's in their refusal to accept that any problem is unsolvable. It's in their ability to find solutions where others see only obstacles. It's in their willingness to try approaches that more advanced civilizations would reject as primitive or inappropriate. Today, the galaxy's most sophisticated medical science was defeated by bacteria from the human digestive system. Today, our greatest minds were outthought by humans who didn't even understand our most basic scientific principles. Today, we learned that sometimes the best weapon against complexity is simplicity, and the best answer to sophisticated problems is primitive stubbornness. The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement from dozens of different species. When the noise finally died down, Ambassador HFY continued. The humans have asked for nothing in return for saving our civilizations. They seek no territory, no technology, no tribute. When we asked them what they wanted as payment for their aid, Admiral Chun told me something I will never forget. She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. She said, "Ambassador, we're neighbors. Neighbors help each other. That's all. No grand speeches about galactic unity or cosmic responsibility. Just neighbors helping neighbors. I propose that we formally recognize humanity not as a primitive species to be tolerated, but as a full member of galactic civilization. More than that, I propose that we ask them to share their approach to problem-solving with the rest of us. We could all learn something from a species that refuses to accept defeat." The vote was unanimous. Later, as the human fleet prepared to depart the Kelrani system, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the restored civilization below. Ships were moving again, communications were buzzing with activity, and the lights of cities that had been dark for months were beginning to flicker back to life. "Admiral," Commander Torres said quietly, "we've received formal thanks from over 200 worlds. The gratitude messages are still coming in. And yet," Chun mused, "they still don't really understand what happened here." "What do you mean?" Chun smiled, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so alien. "They think they called for help and got lucky when primitive humans accidentally stumbled onto a solution their advanced science couldn't find. They don't understand that this is what humans do, which is, we show up. We refuse to quit. We try everything, even the things that shouldn't work. And somehow we find a way." She turned from the viewport, addressing the bridge crew. "Set course for Earth, Commander. I have a feeling this won't be the last time the galaxy needs neighbors who don't know when to give up." As the human fleet jumped back to faster-than-light travel, they left behind a galaxy that had learned something important about judging others by their apparent limitations. They had also left behind a new understanding of what it meant to be human. It wasn't about having the best technology or the most advanced science. It was about having the stubborn determination to keep trying when everyone else had given up. It was about finding simple solutions to complex problems. It was about showing up when others needed help, regardless of what you expected in return. And, perhaps most importantly, it was about refusing to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. The galaxy had called for medical ships and received battleships instead. But in the end, they had gotten exactly what they needed. A reminder that sometimes the best weapon against impossible odds is the simple refusal to be defeated. In the months that followed, human medical teams would be requested by species across the galaxy. Not because humanity had the most advanced medicine, but because they had something more valuable. The certainty that there was always another approach to try, another angle to explore, another way forward when all other paths seemed blocked. The galaxy had learned to stop underestimating the species that didn't know how to quit. And humanity had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from superior weapons, but from superior determination. They had asked for healthcare support and received human battleships instead. In the end, that had made all the difference.